Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at arrays. Arrays are simply lists, a list of items or lists of data. So when you think of an array, think of a list. An array is an object that holds data of the same type. That's key to remember that arrays are objects and we can use them as such. So any way that we would normally use an object, we can use an array in the same way, and we'll look at some similarities. They hold data of the same type. Keep that in mind. So it's one of the limitations of arrays that if we have an array of integers, it can only hold integers. If we have an array of strings, it can only hold strings. I'm going to pop in Eclipse here and we're going to take a look at some examples. I like to take arrays pretty slowly, and so today we're only going to look at how to create them and how to access their different, their elements that are inside of them. And so we're going to take it rather slow. We'll work into like how we're going to work this into bigger programs and how to create algorithms with them later on down the road. But we're going to take it kind of slow. At first, I want to take a look at how to create them like this. So look here at how I'm making this integer called num, right? We're used to this. We've seen this. This is called a declaration. So this is me declaring this variable called num. And when I do this, Java creates a spot in memory for this variable called num. And it says, hey, and it knows that I'm going to put an integer inside of it. And then I can come back later and I can initialize it with some type of data, right? And I never can spell initialize, but whatever, I'm going to leave it. So this fills it with a 5, right? And so we've done this and we've seen this before. We can do an array the exact same way. So looking at this line here, this is me telling Java, hey, I want to make an array of integers. These brackets are new to us. These aren't typically things that we use in our code, so these are going to be new. You're going to get them confused with parentheses all the time, and it's okay. But a bracket symbolizes a list or an array. Just like up here, this is the data type for the variable. This is the data type for the list. It says, hey, I want to make an array of ints. If this were an array of doubles, it would look like that. If it was an array of strings, it would look like this. If it was an array of booleans, it would look like that. We just change it to whatever data type we're wanting to deal with, right? We're going to do ints. So this simply creates in memory a spot for a variable called nums that's going to hold a list of integers. We can then, just like we did up here, we can come back later and fill it with a little more information. So we can come back on line 2 and take the same variable nums, and we're going to say equals new int 3. And let's break that down. That new keyword showed up when we were talking about classes and objects. And if you remember, what it means is we're going to create a new object. Okay, so it's going to create a new array object in memory. This tells it that, hey, yeah, I wanted to make an array of integers. But it goes further. If we throw a number inside that bracket, it tells it the size of the list that we want. So we're telling it, I want a list of 5 elements. If I wanted a list of 3 elements. If I wanted 5, I'd put a 5 in there. If I wanted 10, I'd put a 10 in there. Whatever you want. However many things you want to put in your list. Another one of the limitations of arrays is once you set the size of your list, it cannot be changed. So if I set this list to 10 items, it will always have 10 items. Let's take it back to 3. Okay, so at this point, let me go ahead and play the code. At this point, this is what is stored inside of my list. You can see that I'm printing it out, and we'll talk about what that is here in a second. So it has nothing but zeros inside the list. Here's what my list looks like. I'm going to type it out for us so we can see it. And I cannot type today. So right now, I have nothing but zeros inside my list. That's just default values that it's going to put in there until I come back later and maybe change those values. We need to talk about indexing. We've heard the word indexing before. Where we've seen it before is with strings. When dealing with strings and substring, we could identify a character inside a string using indexing. The same way we can identify the location of an element inside of an array using indexing. And I'm going to put the indexing here. Okay, if we remember from strings, indexing starts at number 0 and goes up from there. So the first element in our array is identified with an index or subscript of 0. You'll hear the word index or subscript used interchangeably. I like to use the word index, so but on Runestone you might see some subscript instead. So the first item is index 0, the second item is index 1, and then the next index 2, and so on and so on, as far as you would like to go, or however big your array is. Why do we need to know this? Like, why does it matter? Well, these are addresses. These are ways of me to, this is a way for me to access that location in the list. Why do I want to do that? Well, maybe I want to print it. This is what it would look like. I would take the name of the list, nums, and then I'm going to put a bracket again. That's new. We don't use brackets a lot. And then inside the bracket, you put the index location of the thing that you want out of your list. So if I say nums is 0, that's going to get the first item in the list. If I say nums 1, it's going to get the next item, and nums 2, the next item, and so on and so on. Let's go a little bit further. Here's another reason why I might want to know that, or how I could use indexing. I can come back later and I can update the values in the array. So here I've got nums 0 equals 25. This is going to reference the first item in the list right there. And then it's going to set it to 25. This is going to reference the next item, set it to 50, the next item, and set it to 75. So at this point, my list looks like this. That's how my list is going to look after this code runs right here. And as you can see, I'm printing it out again down here. So we can see these values being printed out. And all I'm doing is just redoing these print statements, right? So this is how I would access these elements in the list. You put the name of the list, and then you put the index location of the thing that you want. Okay, are there other things we can do using indexing? There is. So if you recall, everything in this list is an integer. So I can use this indexing the same way I would any other integer. So any way I would use an integer in my code, likewise I can use this instead. Here's an example. If I want to get the total of all the elements in the array, here's what that would look like. That's going to get the first element, it's going to add the second element, and it's going to add the third element. Essentially, Java is reading this like this. It's plugging in those values into this statement. Okay? So it's really important that you understand that any way that I would use an integer, I can use this instead. It's simply going to plug in that value. It's going to go to that location in the list, pull that integer, and plug it in. When we use booleans, same way. We could use a list of booleans and use them in our if statements or our while loops or what have you. Okay, let's look at another way that we can declare and initialize these lists. I'm going to get rid of this piece here. I was using that as an example. So actually I'm going to put that back. So what's another way we could do this work here? We can combine them, and that's the way we normally do them, right? We would do that like this instead. The same way we can combine that statement, we can combine this statement as well. So I can take this piece, this right-hand side, and I can combine it in one line. This is typically how we're going to do it in class. You can see it both ways. I know that you'll see it both ways on Runestone and things like that, and in the book. This is just an easier way. It's a lot quicker. Do it in one statement, and so this is how we'll normally do it. Is combining it into one line. So that's good to know. Let's take a look at another way that we can initialize this data. What if we already know what's going to go inside of our list? Here's how we would do that. So here I have a list of names, a list of strings, essentially. And I can go ahead and get rid of that right-hand side, and I can initialize the data right off the bat. And this looks a little weird, and there's a lot of syntax with this that we have to remember. We got our curly brackets, we've got commas and stuff like that, and so we can forget these, different syntaxes as we get, trying to go a little bit faster with this stuff. This is how it would look with integers, right? We just place those inside the list. Okay, and then we'll play this code. Here's what it's doing. This is just referencing everything in the list. And then we're going to say we're going to combine these names. And I wanted to show you this. We're concatenating this stuff together. See? So anywhere that I would normally, or any way I would normally use a string, I can use this indexing to place those strings there from the list. It's going to say, hey, name 0, that's Larry. I'm going to plug it in, and I can use concatenation and combine them together, just like we were doing the total in the last one with the integers. That's a really important concept, that we can use these, whatever the data type is for the list, I can use those items the same way that I would, or those elements the same way I would normally use them if they weren't in the list. Okay, let's look at the last way that we would possibly use this stuff. So we've looked at, how we could add numbers. We can use them in our print statements and stuff like that. So like using these in print statements would look like this, right? So printing them, adding numbers, combining strings. We've looked at examples of all those. What if we wanted to let the user set the values for the things in my array? Here's what that would look like. Not much different. So in this case, we would use this method because we don't know what's going to go in the array. We would just say, hey, I want an array of 3 elements, right? And we just plug a 3 in. Then we would use our scanner to input the elements into the array the same way we were doing these numbers here, right? So here's what this would look like. I didn't put any prompts in here, but Larry, Mo, and so it's going down those input.next lines, right? Larry, Mo, and Curly. And then it combines, so Larry, Mo, Curly, and then it combines them together and prints it out. So, yeah, everything we just went through is there in the notes for you. We're going to, like I said, we're going to take it slow. We're going to practice how to create these arrays. And then once we get comfortable with that, we'll start making some more algorithms and putting them inside of our bigger programs.